Oh, okay. Present. I'd like to call this joint meeting of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District Budget Committee and School Board and public hearing session to order. I'd like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the Budget Committee members who are present for this evening's meeting, which include Raul Blanchet, Matt McGuire, Tom Whalen, Dave Bland, Tony Stanizzi, Cindy Van Conant is our school board representative, and on the phone is Brian Rader, who is unable to participate in person this evening. So Brian, if you could confirm that it's not reasonably practical for you to be here this evening and that you can hear the proceedings, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, that's correct. I can't be there. I'm recovering from a cold. I can hear everybody fine.
Great, thanks Brian. Holly?
Hi, I'd like to call the meeting of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District order as well. I'm Holly Durlow Babcock, Chair. I have joining me Tom Solon, Vice Chair, Beth Williams, Krista Whalen, Cindy Van Conant, Kate Stoll. Liz Brown is unable to be here tonight. I have Kelly Seeley here as our assistant business, our business administrator, sorry, Gina Bergstock, assistant superintendent, and Superintendent Andy Corey. And I think the first thing we need to do is take a recess? Or?
Well, at this point, I'll just ask if anyone has any agenda adjustments for the evening. Andy?
I just wanted to notify the public that the hearing on SB2, we will discuss that tonight, but there'll be two other hearings held. One will be Wednesday, February 16th at the Co-op School Board meeting, and Wednesday, February 23rd, prior to the Brookline School Board meeting, because the requirement requires a hearing in both towns because we're a cooperative district. So this way we'll be able to discuss that tonight. The board can choose to take positions or not take positions on that tonight. And then the 16th and the 23rd, we will have the, again, notice public hearings on SB2.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. At this time, since we, as Andy mentioned, we have 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening. One is for a lease hearing. The second one, as Andy stated, is because we posted the public hearing for SB2, we'll hold that this evening. And the third one will be the budget hearing on the financial articles in the warrant. So at this time, I will accept a motion to recess the Budget Committee meeting until the conclusion of the public hearing. Because Brian is participating by phone, we need to take roll call votes for all the votes this evening. So I'll take that motion by Dave, seconded by Raul. Okay. If you could all signify your vote when I call your name. Tony? You have to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, Tony's yes. Dave? Yes.
Yes.
Tom is yes.
Tom and
Matt
I.
is yes.
Yes.
Raul is yes, and Darlene is yes. Brian?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, that's 8-0. Budget Committee stands in recess.
Okay, for the House School Board, Cooperative School Board, I need to recess until the I need a motion that the board recess until the conclusion of the public hearing. Moved by Beth. I need a second.
Second.
Kate. All in favor? 6-0. Motion passes.
Great, so we'll move on to, this is some standard language that we have for our public hearing presentations. These just kind of provide the rules of how we conduct a public hearing and how we go about accepting public input. So we'll be introducing the articles with stated financial impact or otherwise, or other articles that require legal public hearings. Public input may be provided per article. After the public hearing of all articles, the Budget Committee and School Board will deliberate and take positions on them. The amount of the budget article may be amended by the Budget Committee, and the 10% maximum allowable appropriation limits the maximum appropriation which may be recommended at the district meeting. For public input, input itself is restricted to Hollis and Brookline residents of legal voting age. An exception is made for members of the administration or others necessary for clarification or presentation of information. The input will be requested per article. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record. Any questions should be directed to the chair of myself for the Budget Committee or Chair Babcock for the school board. There's a speaking time of 2 minutes. You may speak again to an article after all others have had an opportunity, and please be brief if your point has been made by others. So at this time, we'll move to I'll open the public hearing for the lease hearing for Article 1 of the warrant, which is for ventilation and energy upgrades, and reads as follows. To see if the school district will vote to authorize the school board to enter into a 15-year lease purchase agreement for $2,886,491 to finance the acquisition and installation of energy-efficient cooling equipment at Hollis Brookline High School to replace aging equipment, bring comfort to staff and students, and to improve energy efficiency, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $235,471 for payments due under the lease purchase agreement during the 2022-2023 fiscal year. The lease purchase agreement will contain an escape or non-appropriation clause. Majority vote is required. The estimated tax impact for both Hollis and Brookline is 11 cents per thousand or $11 per 100,000.
Darlene? I just have a question for clarification.
Yes.
Is the equipment only cooling, or is it heating and cooling equipment?
I will leave that to the superintendent. I just read the article as it was presented.
I understand that, but I think it's important that that be clarified.
It's heating and cooling.
Okay. Can the article be amended before posting to be accurate in that regard? Because it just says cooling equipment, and it replaces furnaces, too.
You can make that change because of the public hearing after we go back
Okay.
into our
Thank you.
board meetings. The school board still controls the warrant at this time.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I'll ask if there's any information the school board or superintendent would like to share about the project itself.
Sure, if I may. For the ventilation and energy upgrades, our goal is to control the indoor environments and learning spaces and create comfortable conditions as well as create sustainable energy efficiency. So we will gain a benefit of dehumidification, a new heating function, as well as much more efficient boilers for the high school. As part of this process specifically, we're replacing aging rooftop units, which will improve both ventilation and energy savings. These new rooftop units will include dehumidification that will better regulate indoor environments during the uncomfortable, humid months of the school year. Local area schools, including Nashua and Manchester, are adopting this approach for controlling building climates. This accomplishes our need to replace aging building systems, creating a better learning environment with comfortable teaching spaces throughout the second and third floors of Hollis Brookline High School. We will be replacing units that were installed in 1996. HVAC number 3 would be replaced, which is the Media and Library Center. The HVAC unit 2 would replace, which is also originally from 1996, and that does your special ed FIMAS second floor wing. Also RTU 1, rooftop unit 1 from 1996, does your first, second, and third floor front-facing classrooms. So that would be rooms 147 to 152, 201 to 204, 300 to 307, along with 317 and 318. Rooftop Unit 2 was also a 1996 purchase. That does your second and third floor courtyard classrooms. So that would be rooms 216 through 222, 309, 329, and 323. Also, we have another roof unit from 1996, which takes us and does all the classrooms and the locker room spaces to its gymnasium. And then rooftop unit 1C, which is our newest rooftop unit that we're replacing, which was put in 2000. That does the additional wing and classroom and labs on the first, second, and third floor. The projected cost of the total building is $2,456,491.40. We have built in a contingency to that of $130,000, and there'll be electrical upgrades for those new units, which will also lend itself to the efficiency, because a lot of it will have to do with the tracking and ability to set the units remotely as well as internally. So that electrical upgrade would be $300,000. This is a multi-phase project, so this would be phase 1. The total cost of phase 1 is $2,886,491.40. In terms of the Budget Committee had asked questions about what aren't we doing, so I did want to cover that, so that's why we provided a new handout, which is the last page. We have some other rooftop units, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that are from 1996 to 2000, that would be delaying to the next phase of the project, partly because of the areas that they oversee, which are in still very good condition. Our auditorium, which is already has dehumidification, our 2 gymnasiums, our 2 larger spaces, and the dance room, which also, again, already has dehumidification. In terms of the main office and guidance, they would also be in the next phase, and the cost of these units are provided to you on the last page. And then the actual last phase of rooms that we would need to be totally complete the project. And those are the spaces that are highlighted in blue, don't currently have cooling. So we segmented it out so that you could easily determine what has cooling and what does not. Part of our reasoning for this is we are approaching the end of useful life for these machines. Doing it in one large phase will allow us to make a substantial change in our heating and cooling system to the high school. In one regard, it will provide cooling for the first time. If you have been in the high school during the humid months, early fall, late spring, you will find that the third floor, which is our science labs, are very uncomfortable. So this will allow us to address the educational setting and the educational environment for students. We also, during COVID, have spent extensive time reviewing our ventilation systems across the SAU. And though they are in compliance for COVID and have done a wonderful job, this will allow us to prepare for the next 20 to 25 of building useful life for the high school. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Kelly and I will do our best to answer anything that may come up on this.
I have several questions. Oops.
We're going to have, this is a public hearing, so
all
we're
right,
waiting to
yeah.
hear from the public, and then any questions the Budget Committee has will be, can be asked and answered during deliberations.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So at this time, thank you, Superintendent Corey. At this time, I'll invite members of the public to provide any input on Article 1. Seeing none, I will close public input and close the public hearing on Article 1 at 6:14 p.m. And we can move on to, yeah, I just need to find it. Okay. Do we have to wait to open the public hearing since it's posted for 6:30? Okay. So at this time, since we have a little time until the public hearing, which is slated for SB2, is scheduled to start at 6:30, I do have a presentation of some information that will be useful for the entire warrant that's being put forward. So I'll just move forward and go through that information at this time. So looking at the article summary for the FY23 warrant for the co-op, we are going to be looking at the articles with financial impact. Our Article 1, as the superintendent just presented, for $235,471. Article 2 will discuss the second year of a multi-year agreement for our support staff under the HESA contract of $88,523. Article 3 is the school operating budget at $25,278,502. Article 4 is the SAU budget at $1 million. The share for the co-op is $1,070,947. A facilities maintenance trust of $200,000 and a special education trust at $25,000 for a total warrant of $26,898,443, which is a 4.8% increase from the current budget that we're managing now. The distribution of that budget is about 53% salaries and benefits, another 18% for student services, which also does include salaries related to student service personnel. General education costs represent about 15%, and the remaining 13% of the budget is split between building maintenance, transportation, transfers, and debt service. The co-op itself services a student population of what's projected to be 1,166 students in FY23, which is a 21 student decrease from the October 1st enrollment of 1187. That enrollment is split between the middle school and the high school at about a 2/3, 1/3 split. So the high school has around 800 and the middle school around 400. From a composition perspective, for the two districts in the co-op, we're looking at a student distribution for FY23 through about FY25. The projected enrollments are about a 55-45% split between Hollis and Brookline. What you see here in this chart is that we are deviating from kind of the FY17 to FY19 when the district was split more evenly 50-50 and between the two districts, and we're starting to move more toward that 55-45% split, which has an impact on the apportionment formula that's predominantly driven by average daily membership, which is related to enrollment. When we're looking at the budget that is, we're going to be seeking approval on at the annual district meeting, it's important to understand that the budget that you approve is not the amount of money that affects your taxes directly. The amount of money that's used, the number that's used to calculate the tax effort or the amount raised by your actual tax bill is a number less than the budget that's passed. What we saw in FY22 is a lower tax effort than was estimated due to a significant budget underruns that were related to COVID and shifts in programming changes that took place. So for FY22, we did see a significant reduction in the actual tax effort than what was originally anticipated. That change in tax effort and that reduction resulted in a lower co-op tax rate for the town of Hollis. We were estimating for the current year, which is the based in the tax bills that were just received in November, we were estimating the co-op portion to be $7.58 per thousand. It was actually $6.50 per thousand, and that translated and contributed to a total tax rate change for the town of Hollis of minus 48 cents per thousand. So the actual tax rate for the town of Hollis in the most recent tax bills was an overall rate reduction in total across the K-6 district, the cooperative portion for Hollis, and the town of Hollis. On the Brookline side, again, the tax rate impact was, for the co-op, was lower than estimated. We were estimating an impact of $11.95 per thousand. What eventuated was a tax rate of $11.07 per thousand. Brookline was affected slightly differently by the impact of returning unreserved fund balance. Brookline also lost some substantial funding related to very specific targeted disparity aid that they were no longer going to be receiving. So there were some different impacts to Brookline. And so overall, the total tax rate impact for the last bills that were just distributed in November was an increase of 78 cents per thousand. Again, in the tax bills that were just received. I would like to just also mention that while these rates go back to FY18, nothing has been adjusted for inflation. So moving forward and understanding some of the drivers into what we're estimating the tax impacts to be for this new budget, there are three significant components that include the budget itself, which we're discussing, revenue, and state aid, in addition to impacts of the apportionment formula. So for co-op revenue, what we are looking at as we move from FY22 to FY3 is a reduction in anticipated revenue of approximately $1.6 million. So again, this is due to the fact that we do not plan on returning an unreserved fund balance at the magnitude that was returned to the taxpayers at the end of the last school year, which for the co-op in total was approximately $1.9 million. For state aid, we also receive state aid, which is based primarily by our enrollment levels. And as we move into the estimates for FY23, in total, each district, each town, Hollis and Brookline, would anticipate receiving slightly less state aid. For the town of Hollis, it's about $90,000 less than previous for the current school year, and for Brookline, about $97,000. You will notice there's a significant shift in the components of state aid, and that's due to some legislative changes that are due to go into effect. What ends up happening is the statewide education property tax, which is driven by the values of each community, will see a significant reduction. For Hollis, it's estimated to be about $434,000. For Brookline, about $187,000. And that difference is made up through a higher than normal adequacy grant, which is driven predominantly by our student population. So the numbers don't offset at a dollar for dollar level because the estimates looking at FY23 do show some reductions in what we are anticipating average daily membership to be for the end of this school year. It's a very complex and convoluted formula, but basically due to lower than anticipated enrollment and average daily membership numbers, some of that offsets the impact of higher adequacy per student. So in total, what that means is there are, of the almost $3 million change in tax effort that we see going into FY23, about 60% of that is due to things that are not related to the budget. So about 1.2 million of that is related to the budget itself. About 1.6 million is related to revenue changes, and state aid changes are about 187,000. So this provides a general overview of the budget that we're putting forward in the second column from the right. For listed FY23 is 26.9 million. We reduce it by co-op revenue and are left with an amount to be apportioned between the two towns of $24,939,581. In a further slide, I'll talk about the apportionment between the two towns, because at that point, the state aid is applied to each town, and then we have a total tax effort. But for the purposes of this slide, I've combined all of the aid and to show you the resulting tax effort of $19.8 million. As those of you know, we have an apportionment formula that splits the costs for the co-op between Hollis and Brookline. That formula is based on most predominantly on average daily membership. Another small component is based on equalized value that yields a net apportionment amount. So that's what the apportionment that gets applied essentially to that first figure after co-op revenue is removed. That's the net result. And then once all the state aid is applied by town, it results in a local tax effort distribution. So we're anticipating for FY23 that distribution would be about 58% Hollis and 42% Brookline. This chart just breaks down that budget explanation and splits it and apportions it between Hollis and Brookline. And the resulting local tax rate for the 11.4 million for Hollis would be estimated to be $7.97 per thousand, and estimated for Brookline at $11.98 per thousand. So that is the piece of the your local tax rate that gets added to the costs for the Hollis School District and Brookline School District and represent your local school tax rate on your bill. There's another rate on the bill that's directly impacted and affects school districts, which is the co-op statewide education property tax. That's the dollar per thousand related to raising that amount of money that I previously discussed, where I said there was going to be a shift in those funds for next year. So what I've shown here is the estimated rate for that swept calculation, which would be 70 cents per thousand for Hollis, 66 cents per thousand for Brookline, and then we get to a total tax rate. So the comparison between the two, the total tax rate between the current bill, the estimate, and the bill that you've just received would result in a tax rate for the co-op of $8.67 per thousand versus the current rate of $7.52 per thousand, which would be a 15.3% increase. But when you look at the co-op percentage of the total tax bill, that nets to a 5% increase on the tax bill. Similarly for Brookline, the $8.4 million that was estimated for Brookline results in a co-op local tax rate of $11.98 per thousand. We add the co-op swept rate, which is another 66 cents per thousand, and come up with $12.64, which is a 5.2% increase over the current bill, or the net effect to the total tax bill is 2.2% for the town of Brookline. And so what time are we at?
6:20.
6:28. Okay, so at this point, I will take another minute to just go through, again, the public input rules, to just reiterate that we are looking at, well, even though there aren't that many members of the public here this evening, we are still looking toward a speaking time of 2 minutes. And we will move to the public hearing for the SB2 petition article in about a minute and a half. So I'll pull
Can we read the article?
I can read the article.
You got a minute.
Okay, or we can listen to our moderator.
Drew Mason, Baxter Road, Hollis, and I'm the district moderator. The warrant I have a copy of says starting at 7 o'clock. We've been doing 6:30 recently, and since we're going to probably go 2 days, I'd like to ask to start at 6:30.
It has been corrected.
Okay, great, thank you. And the other point I would like to make is, if you so choose, both the school board and the budget committee can put their recommendations on every article on the warrant. So you don't have to, it's your choice.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
6:29. So you can, I think you can read the.
Okay, I'll read slowly.
Look, it's
So-
out there.
For the next one, too.
We're gonna have, we can't start the next one till 7,
Right,
so.
right.
And you don't have a presentation.
I don't have a
So we just sort of
presentation
stare at each other. And look at that, it's 6:30.
Oh, look at that. So at this point, I will open the public hearing at 6:30 for the petition article addressing SB2, which reads as follows. It presents as Article 7 on the warrant as a petitioned warrant article. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 40:13, known as SB2, to allow official ballot voting on all issues before the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District on the second Tuesday of March?
And we don't have a presentation on this because it's a
It's a
petition warrant.
petitioned warrant article, so at this point, I'll invite,
I just wanted to mention the other dates again. Just for community members, because this is a petition warrant article, in the co-op, it will require another public hearing in Brookline and in Hollis. So on February 16th, as part of the school board meeting, there'll be a public hearing embedded in that meeting on SB2. And on February 23rd, prior to our Brookline School Board, we will hold a public hearing on SB2 in the town of Brookline at the CSDA Library. Those notices will be in the paper, and they will be publicized in our school buildings, on our website, as well as at the SAU for anybody who may have questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
so at this point, I will ask if anyone has any public input on this petitioned warrant article. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this article at 6:31 PM. And since our next public hearing is not scheduled to begin until 7 o'clock, I will, we'll recess this public hearing and be in recess until 7 PM.
The notice on the SAU site says 6:30.
It's true. I originally had it set for 6:15 and 6:30.
Was it posted to the paper at 6:30?
I believe so.
The budget hearings is 6:30.
So it's just the agenda that has it at 7.
Just the agenda that has it at 7?
So it's posted at 6:30?
It's posted at 6:30.
Okay.
And we're good?
Well, fantastic.
That's great news.
So then we won't be standing in recess?
We are not standing in recess any longer, and we will be moving on to, since Article 1 was the ventilation upgrades for the high school, we can move on to, I would like to open the public hearing for the remainder of the articles on the warrant at 6:32 PM. And we'll move on with Article 2, which is the support staff contract, to see if the school district will vote to approve the cost items for the second year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement reached between Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board and the Hollis Education Support Staff Association for the 2021-22, 2022-23, and 2023-24 school years, which calls for the following increases in support staff salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. Fiscal year estimated increase for 2022-23 is $88,523. And further, to raise and appropriate a sum of $88,523 for the first fiscal year. That should actually read for
It's
the
the
second
second.
fiscal year, 2022-23, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in support staff salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. My apologies for the oversight on my part. I pulled the language from the prior warrant and updated the amount, but I will make sure that the deck that's posted to the SAU website reads second fiscal year for 2022-23.
So it's correct on the warrant?
It is correct on the warrant. The estimated tax impact for Hollis is 3 cents per thousand, and for Brookline is 6 cents per thousand. At this time, I'd like to invite Krista Whalen from the school board to talk about a brief overview of the contract itself.
Thank you, Darlene. This year, it will be a decrease from last year because last year we did a shift in the category for all the custodial staff, and that has already taken place, so that will not affect this year. So year 2 will be a step plus 2% increase, so everyone on the step table will get their step plus a 2% increase, and all of the employees off step will receive a 2.5% increase. The health insurance will be the same as it was last year, a $50 increase annually for single and two-person, and a $25 annually for family. So that will bring us to the wage impact being $70,523 with an $18,000 insurance increase, which would bring the total to an $88,523 for the support staff contract.
Can you go back a page, a slide? On the health insurance, who pays the $50 increase?
We do. That's to our cap. Yes. We have a cap and not a percentage.
Thank you.
So it's a $50 increase to the cap that we pay. Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. At this time, I'll invite any members of the public to provide input on Article 2. Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 3, the operating budget, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $25,278,502 for the support of schools for the payment of salaries for the school district officials and agents and for the payment of statutory obligations of the district. This appropriation does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles. The estimated tax impact is $7.50 to the town of Hollis and $11.82 per thousand to Brookline.
28.
I'm sorry, I'll repeat that. $11.28 per thousand. Thank you, Tom. Just a quick overview of the operating budget changes. We're looking at an increase from the current year of $772,744, which is a 3.2% increase. The new items themselves, in summary, represent some FTE changes, maintenance and safety additions, some technology purchases, and purchases related to academics and athletics. With regard to the FTE changes, we're looking at changes to expanded hours for some staff. We are looking at adding a social worker and introducing some shared positions that are shared either within the co-op itself or across the district. Across the district, those positions include a substitute that we hire that would substitute in any portion of the district for food service, and an instructional assistant. And we are also be extending some hours for our paraprofessionals as students move from the high school, the middle school to the high school, to ensure continuity of educational and IEP requirements. And addition of an ESOL or English speakers of other languages, someone to support students who speak other languages according to state requirements. For maintenance and software items, the maintenance and safety items really do run across the district themselves and involve everything from parking, doing some paving up in the parking lot for the turf field, interior upgrades to doors and windows at the high school, replacement lighting at the middle school, flooring improvements, the introduction of bollards for safety items. From a technology perspective, we're looking to purchase some staff laptops, change and upgrade projectors, add additional wireless access points. From an academic perspective, we're looking for various classroom resources across both schools that support languages, history, and many of the different subject areas supported by the curriculum. In athletics, we're looking for some additions to wrestling, and there was one other sport. What was it? Volleyball poles, that's it. Looking at the major increases, we see a $172,975 increase, or 2.9% increase in regular salaries and those are contracted increases related to the HEA professional staff contract that was approved at last year's meeting. We see a $147,943 increase across student services, which includes programming changes necessary for students, and does include actually some savings for special education transportation. For retirement, we're seeing an increase of $179,725 related to increases in payments to the New Hampshire retirement system, in addition to retirement benefits being paid out to retiring staff. It's a significant portion of that $179,000. In the current budget, we didn't identify any members of the current staff who would be retiring, but as we move into FY23, we see several members having identified that they're looking to retire, and we will be paying them the benefit. And this remaining $633,235 that's identified is spread across those categories that I just explained earlier, across from, again, FTEs to various purchases across the district. For major decreases, we do see $55,000 worth of savings in healthcare benefits. We have a reduced GMR, or guaranteed maximum rate, as we're looking at FY23, and along with some difference to the healthcare benefits that staff are taking, attrition of staff, and different levels of movement. We are going to anticipate realizing $55,000 worth of savings. In replacement computer equipment, we're looking at $168,180 worth of savings. We were able to complete the phasing of the major computer upgrades with some of the funds that were remaining at the end of last year. So we see a significant reduction in that area. Principal's office, we see a reduction of $19,983 due to savings in copier leases at the high school, since we own the leases at this point. Own the copiers. And in regular education, we see a reduction of $11,710. So at this time, I'll invite any members of the public to provide input on the budget. Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 4. The SAU budget. Shall the district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,070,947 as the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District's portion of the SAU budget of $2,107,176 for the forthcoming fiscal year? This year's adjusted budget of $2,018,210 with $1,025,645 assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all of the school district voters voting in this school administrative unit. The estimated tax impact for the SAU budget is 42 cents per thousand in Hollis and 68 cents per thousand in Brookline. 68 cents per thousand in Brookline. At this point, I would like to invite Krista Whalen again to speak to the SAU budget as chair of the governing board.
Thank you again, Darlene. So the budget has gone up 7.7%. It's a $149,919 increase from last year. The majority of that is in salaries. We are, I will detail that in a second, but we are proposing a compliance and communication specialist for an income of $45,000. We also have a $16,000 board-approved salary adjustment to allow us to be able to give, adjust salaries as needed based on comparisons that we're finding in local districts. And all staff is getting a 3% increase. Healthcare, there's a $32,000 benefits for the new compliance and communications person. The health insurance rates have gone up 3.9%, and there have been some health insurance membership changes, easy for me to say, within the SAU. We also have a $3,700 for desktops and one laptop. So the new proposed compliance and communication specialist, the administration came to the board, and they have been discussing the demands for compliance, documentation, and other communication matters from many right-to-know requests, which we're going to get, which are fair, and we should, accept those, and from some lawsuits that we've been receiving. But it's also for information, getting information out to the public, which becomes difficult. It's easy for us to get information out to the people, the students, the parents of the students, but it's a lot more difficult to get information out to the general public. So we need to have someone who can help get that information out, not for propaganda, but for information. The position goal is to generate compliance documentation and to take a lot of that pressure off of the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and business manager who have been dealing with the majority of that, and allow them to focus more on educating our children. So that is the SAU budget.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite members of the public to provide input on Article 4 for the SAU budget. Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 5. My numbering seems to be off. What is happening here? Oh, sorry, I have the maintenance trust listed as Article 7. That'll be changed as well. Article 5, Facilities Maintenance Expendable Trust, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate up to the sum of $200,000 to be added to the previously established School Building and Facilities Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund, some to come from the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District's June 30, 2022 unassigned fund balance available on July 1st of 2022. The estimated, in this case, since the expendable trust would be funded through unassigned fund balance, that means that that amount of money will not be returning to the public, so you would be foregoing tax savings of 8 cents per thousand in Hollis and 13 cents per thousand in Brookline. At this point, I just want to give a brief overview of the anticipated utilization of that $200,000. We have a current balance in the facilities maintenance trust of $99,625. We're adding proposed funding of $200,000 to cover phases, different phased projects. So it'd be phase 7 of the Hollis Brookline High School roof and phase 2 of HBHS paving, as well as some HVAC upgrades at HBMS for $60,000. So after making those upgrades, we anticipate an ending balance in the maintenance trust of $99,625. Is there any input on Article 5 for the Facilities Maintenance Trust? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Special Education Trust. Article 6, to see if the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District will vote to raise and appropriate up to the sum of $25,000 to come from the June 30, 2022 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2022, to be added to the previously established Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. No amount to be raised from taxation. Here again, you're foregoing a tax savings of a penny per thousand in Hollis and 2 cents per thousand in Brookline. So this would add $25,000 to our existing balance in this trust fund, which is, I believe, $200,000. We did not fund this article last year, and would be looking to fund it going into FY23. Is there any public input on the Special Education Trust Fund? Great. Seeing none, we will move on. Now, that would be the end of our normal, our regular warrant. We did have 4 petition articles that were submitted. One of them required a public hearing, which was SB2, and so Article 7 I've already read, shared, and we've had a public hearing on. The others don't require an official public hearing, as they don't raise and appropriate funds. But since we're here this evening, they're added to the article. We'll read them and see if there's any public input on them. So Article 8 is a petition warrant article. Shall the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District rescind authorization under RSA 198:4-B, Roman numeral 2, so that the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District returns 100% of year-end unassigned general funds to the taxpayers?
Do you want to open the floor?
I'm wondering if I should explain. Okay. Yes, we'll just open the floor to public input. Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 9.
And we can comment on these during deliberations.
Another petition warrant article. Shall the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District direct the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board to adopt and implement a policy to ensure that each textbook or other assigned book used in the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District, as well as a copy of all professional training materials provided to teachers, administrators, and staff of the district paid with school district funds, be made available to the public at the Hollis Social Library and at the Brookline Public Library in hard copy or electronic form, organized by grade or teacher? Is there any input on Article 9? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 10. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 32:5, Roman numeral 5-B, requiring that the annual budget and all special warrant articles having a tax impact as determined by the school board shall contain a notation stating the estimated tax impact of the article? The determination of the estimated tax impact shall be subject to approval by the governing body. Any input on Article 10? Article 11 closes the warrant at transacting any other business which may become for the board. So at this time, seeing no additional public input, I'll close the public hearing on the proposed warrant at 6:51 p.m. and return the Budget Committee from recess.
And I'd like to reconvene the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board as well
Okay.
at 6:51.
So at this point, this is the point of the evening where each of our boards is going to have a discussion about the articles and take positions. So I'll open discussion on Article 1.
Sure.
Actually, what I'll do is take a motion to approve Article 1 as written.
Second. Make a motion.
Motion by Tom, seconded by Dave.
And I have to do the same thing. I need a motion to recommend Article 1 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Krista.
Okay.
Are we going to
Now we can
discuss
have a
them
discussion.
jointly
Yes.
before the vote?
Yes,
Mhm.
which we're going to do now.
We're going to discuss jointly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Let's go.
Second question to our chair, are you expecting us to take a vote on positions tonight, or are we going to wait till our meeting?
The plan is to take vote on positions tonight.
Okay. Are there any questions, comments?
I had a number of questions with Article 1. In essence, my questions deal with adding information to provide some background on how we got here. In other words, it seems like what was presented was the end result, but there was little discussion on how we went about scoping the effort, how we went about deciding on a 15-year lease, how we went about deciding on a phases rather than a complete job, just to provide some context for why this is the best approach. And so I had the questions were why a lease, why in phases versus the complete job over, say, a year and a half? How was this job scoped and cost estimated? In other words, did you hire a consultant to give you this, or did they just come to the school and say, hey, we got a proposal for you? How long will it take for the whole project to complete once we get going? So,
I'll do my best.
okay.
First of all, we worked with the consultant. They also work with an architectural firm, and we did this based on enrollment projections for the school district in growth. As we brought together this committee and the consultants, what became very clear and foremost on the list was our aging ventilation systems. And it also has been a topic of much discussion because of COVID. And as I said, our cisterns are in good shape, but they are approaching end of life. Since we are doing, the majority of this is equipment, in talking to our bond counsel, lease counsel, he felt very strongly that this was the type of project that was designed with a lease in mind, because it is all equipment. You're able to phase it over time. The lease gives you more flexibility to earn interest on the money as you're phasing the project in, because we only have a 10-week summer. And there's the potential right now with the supply chain issues that we could open up next fall and not have a number of these units in place. But just like we've done in the Hollis School District, we'd be able to bring these firms in on the weekends or over vacations, because they do require cranes in their rooftop units. So that's why we selected the lease. We've been using leases for both projects in Hollis, and the determining factor is more equipment versus building. So if we were going to do brick and mortar, we'd be more likely to go with the bond. Okay. In terms of how we arrived here, last year we were very fortunate to bring on Lance Fittimore, who's our facilities director, and as a result of having that person to spearhead this, he was able to allocate the time on a regular basis and do all the tours and go through unit by unit, determine exactly what classrooms we have. So this is probably one of the most detailed proposals that we've been able to put together, mapping out each classroom in the school, each section of the school, and why we've selected those areas. Why we looked at a phase approach is because as superintendent, it's always been my objective, try to balance the needs of all three entities in the co-op and Hollis and Brookline, because it's only one taxpayer, a taxpayer from Brookline or a taxpayer from Hollis. So at the same time that this project's being proposed, we have a similar proposal for renovations to a Brookline building, and then we have a bond hearing next week in Hollis for approximately $3 million for, again, ventilation systems that need to be upgraded and things that need to be finished at the primary schools, which will wrap that district up pretty much for a number of decades, other than regular maintenance. So how we arrived at the 2.886 was trying to determine how do we get the best bang for our budget. How do we make it manageable? Because Lance, Kelly, and I will have 3 simultaneous projects going on this summer. How do we balance supply chain issues with getting the project completed? And if we move forward, if the voters approve this, we would then coordinate those 3 projects so that we can, best utilize our human resources as well as our contractual resources. So that's where we arrived here. This is phase 1. Phase 2 would be some other areas of ventilation, but phase 2 is also being discussed based on enrollment projections, because if enrollment projections pan out, we will be back to where we probably were, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, where you have a high school that's probably using its capacity rate of 98, 99% for every classroom, every period of the day, which is not a desired You really wanted that to be in the mid-80s. So there is another phase that the board will be introduced to in February. When we decide to bring that forward to the legislative body will be determined by the school board.
So one quick question for clarification, the term lease, at the end of the 15 years, you have to make a payment to keep the equipment, or do you replace the equipment, or how does that work?
No, at the end of the 15 years, the equipment is ours.
Okay,
Okay, so we own it. It's just a matter of when you take the bond, you pay 6 months worth of interest to start with, and then you have your bond payments. When you take the lease, you're given all the money and it sits in an account earning some interest, minimal right now, but it's more than we would get on the bond.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any questions from the board? No? No more? Okay. All right, so, Beth, do you have a question?
Well, I was gonna say, Tom, it was the language in it. When you gonna, I'm not sure when the appropriate time is to ask about that.
You can ask any question now, if you want to ask a question.
I didn't think I had to ask it again. I
Oh, it's the
suggest-
cooling language,
Yeah,
right?
that-
Yeah.
That you just, instead of it saying, or is it,
So would you like to amend the language? Can we make an amendment to the language to have heating and
I don't
cooling?
know, does it need to be amended or just corrected?
Can we correct it to say heating and cooling?
Energy efficient heating and cooling.
Yeah,
HV.
that's fine. Correct it to heating and cooling.
Yep.
All right, are you going to call the vote, or do you want me to do it first?
You go first.
Okay, so I'd like to call a vote on this, since we have the motion on the floor. All in favor? Oh, it's just us, okay, so that's 6-0 for the school board.
Okay.
You have a roll
At this point, I'd like, if there are no other questions, I'll call the vote. Has to be, again, roll call because of Brian's participation. Raul?
Yes?
Matt?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dave? Tony?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
And Darlene votes yes. So it's unanimous, 8-0. Okay, moving on to Article 2. I'll take a motion to recommend Article 2 with a support staff contract of $88,523 as written. From Dave, seconded by Tom.
And I will do the same. I need a motion to recommend Article 2 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth, seconded by Krista.
Any questions, comments?
Any discussion on the
points?
support staff contract? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote from the school board. All in favor? No opposed, 6-0.
Similarly, I'll call the vote from the Budget Committee. Raul?
I abstain.
Okay. Matt?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And Darlene votes yes, so that's 7-0-1, with Raul abstaining. Okay.
Do I have to explain why I abstain?
No?
After.
You can if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. Article 3, the operating budget. I'll take a motion to recommend the budget as written
Make a motion to.
from
recommend.
Raul, seconded by Tom.
And I need a motion to recommend Article 3 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth,
Second.
seconded by Kate.
Any comments?
Any questions or
I
comments?
have a question.
Sure.
The language that says salaries for the school district officials, that could be confused with, that item should be included in the SAU budget rather than the high school, the school.
I think it's standard
District.
language, and our school district is the co-op as opposed to the SAU, which is the administration of the entire SAU.
Okay, so when you compare both the SAU article and this article, there could be some confusion. I mean, at a glance, the school district officials could be interpreted as SAU officials.
Well, I would say this is the standard language that we've used, and our school district is specifically the co-op.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Yep.
Any other comments? Can we go first?
Okay, any comments from the board? Okay, all in favor, oh, Tom?
I'm not going to oppose it for this reason, but I just want to point out, and I'll bring it up later when we talk about the maintenance trust, that although I understand the current thoughts of using the maintenance trust as a way to segregate and identify monies, it's my belief that current expenditures should be in the budget, all maintenance current expenditures, and to put planned required elements into the trust understates what the operating budget really will be for the next year. It also puts those funds at a bit of a risk because the warrant article might not be approved. So I would have preferred that the $200,000 for those 3 items that are needed and planned for next year have been included in the operating budget. I also think that this is a very conservative budget, perhaps a little bit more than is maybe necessary for a couple of areas, primarily in the area of staffing. I suspect that as wages increase, and with what's going on in the current climate nationally, hiring costs may start to increase. We have contracts for our professional staff, but other areas may be subject to needs to pay more. And there has been a fair amount of need for substitutes, things of those areas, so there might have been some staffing positions that would have benefited from expansion. Again, I'm not going to oppose the budget because of this, but I just want to point those things out. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to call the vote from the board. All in favor? 6-0-0.
And for the Budget Committee, Raul,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Darlene votes yes. It's 8-0. Moving on to Article 4, the SAU budget. And I'll take a motion to approve the article as written from Dave, seconded by Tom.
I'll do the same. I need a motion to recommend Article 4 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth.
Second.
I heard it from everybody. Kate, I'll call Kate. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this one? All right, seeing none, I'll call the vote from the school board, please.
I just wanted to hear if there's any discussion from the
Budget Committee?
Budget Committee.
Okay.
before
Oh, yeah.
voting.
Oh, are there any comments?
I felt like they were kind of responding to all of us, so, okay. All in favor? 6-0.
And I'll call the vote for the Budget Committee. Raul,
It's okay.
Yes.
It's just the
Matt,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Just throw it
Tony,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and Darlene votes yes. It's 8-0. Okay, moving on to Article 5. Well, it's listed as 7, and that will be rectified tomorrow. I'll take a motion to approve Article 5 for the Facilities Maintenance Trust as written from Dave, seconded by Tom.
And I need the same thing. I need a motion to recommend Article 5 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth,
Second.
seconded by Cindy. Okay, any discussion on this one? Tom, we heard your point earlier, so do you want to make it again?
No, I just wanted to expand on it. I think the title of a trust to most people is a savings account. It's something to put money for planned and future use. So I think when people see a trust, and in most instances when we build a trust, it is a collection point, not a transfer mechanism. So if you really want to have a separate, I think there are other mechanisms that might be possible. Things like what we use for the pay-to-play, the athletic funds and things. But my point is, I think there is a misconception of what a trust is intended for and how it's currently being proposed to be used that could lead to some concerns from the public as to what they're voting on. So, thank you.
I would just add that in the case of this trust, in the event any of the proposed items come in under budget, we would be able to use the fund as a savings account and build the balance in the budget. And conversely, if any of the items are higher than we anticipate, we can use some of that available balance in the trust for some of those expenses as well. So there is a little bit more latitude there.
So at what point do funds get moved out of the trust to pay for the expenditures?
When a public hearing is held
But
for the amount.
Is that going to be done at the front of the project, after the project, at the end of the school year? Because to do what you're describing means that we've essentially paid for it and then we need to essentially backfill for it.
There's two ways that we've done it. Sorry, there's two ways we've done it. Those items that we identify in the budget as we have here, the public hearing always happens beforehand. Then if there's ever a situation in which it was, let's say, an emergency, we will spend the money and then ask for reimbursement from the trust fund by during the public hearing.
So if you at the beginning of this project where it's budgeted, you will transfer the $200,000 to the general fund, correct? You'll ask for hearing to do so.
Actually, we transfer the $200,000 to the maintenance trust.
Oh, to the
And then it's actually spent.
No, but
from
when you take it out of the maintenance trust,
as an expenditure.
yeah, when will you do that?
After the public hearing. In the first case.
When will you have the public hearing? Before
Prior.
Prior to it?
Unless it's an emergency expense.
Right. So if it's out of there, how do you put it back in if it's not used?
If it's not used, it just stays.
So it doesn't go, it won't be there for future use if it's not needed. It'll have already gone into the general fund, won't it?
No.
It stays in the
trust.
So you authorize but don't move it?
Yes.
You authorize it and then pay the bill.
It's never moved from the trust.
It never gets put into the general fund?
No, it is
Okay.
spent from the trust.
Understand, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll call the vote from the school board. All in favor? Opposed? 5-1.
And for the budget committee, Raul,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Cindy, Brian,
Yes.
and Darlene votes yes. It's 8-0. Moving on to the Special Education Trust, I'll take a motion to approve the article as written.
I'll make a motion to.
From Raul. Dave, you were slow on that one.
Yeah,
Seconded
that's fast.
seconded by
Second.
Dave. Sorry, Matt.
And I need a motion to recommend Article 6 as presented.
So moved.
Beth? I need a second.
Second.
Krista?
So, Dar, did you say we have 200,000 in there?
Yes.
Darlene? Okay. And is our goal 250 or 225?
225.
225 is our goal, so we would reach our goal with this thing. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
From the Budget Committee?
Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? 6-0.
For the Budget Committee, Raul,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
And Darlene votes yes, it's 8-0. Okay, moving on to Article 7. Leave this to you, Holly.
Okay, so, yeah, you guys aren't going to take
We're
a
not going to
position on
take a
this.
position on this.
So,
Well,
this is tricky because we need to make a motion to recommend, well, not recommend, how do we make that?
You would make a motion to recommend.
We make a motion to recommend. So I need a motion to recommend Article 7 as presented. So moved by Beth, second. Second by Kate. So it's-
Sorry,
yeah.
I'll ask the Budget Committee if there's anyone who thinks the Budget Committee should take a position on this. We aren't required to.
Would we not want to because it significantly impacts the way we do our business?
I think it's just in the past, for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years that this is brought forward, I don't think I think at the beginning, the Budget Committee might have taken a position, but we've just refrained from doing so.
Okay. So you're not going to?
We're not.
Okay, so is there any discussion of, this is SB 2, so is there any conversation or discussion, comments? Okay. I think we've talked about this a lot, so all in favor of recommending? Anyone opposed? So the school board does not recommend petition or Article 7. All right.
Okay.
Are you taking a position on 8 or no?
We are.
Okay, good.
I'd like a motion by the Budget Committee to recommend Article 8 as written.
So moved.
From Tom, seconded by somebody, Matt. Okay.
Okay, oh, sorry, and then I need a motion to recommend Article 8.
So moved.
Moved by Beth. Second by Cindy.
Just to provide a little clarification on this, Article 198 4B2 is the law which allows the school district to retain part of its fund balance. Typically what happens at the end of the year is that any unassigned fund balance lapses and returns to the public. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, this RSA was passed that would allow districts to retain up to 2.5% of their net assessment as retained funds. It would, once approved by the legislative body, it requires no further authorization, but does require a vote of the school board every year to move funds to it if it were something that were accepted at a district meeting. The first year this article was brought forward, it was brought up and worded to allow the up to the 2.5% maximum, and an amendment was made at district meeting that authorized the co-op to a 1% maximum. And that's what passed, and that's what we've been operating under for the past several years. I would say until this past year, the co-op never maxed out that 1%. It was always some amount slightly lower, but due to the available funds with COVID and the uncertainty of expenses, probably coupled with the fact that much of the funds that we received through any kind of federal grants were significantly lower than other districts, the school board made the decision to maximize the amount in the retained fund balance, which is about $180,000, give or take. The amount, adjusts slightly with the net assessment. So what this would do would be to rescind that and return that and not allow us at any point going forward to put money to that retained fund balance again. It basically takes away the authorization to do it. It isn't just like we're returning what's there now. It means we can't ever do it again. And we would need to bring it before the legislative body for approval, which now, based on state law, which passed last year, increased the maximum from 2.5% to 5%. So again, districts can modify that amount, but the way the law reads now, it's now 5%. And if a district wanted to move from our 1% or 2.5% that most districts have adopted, you would have to put up an article to increase it to that 5%. Nothing automatically changes just because the law changed. So that's some of the background to how the district has utilized the retained fund balance.
Darlene, can you clarify something you said?
Sure.
If this were to pass, does it remove the possibility that a future warrant article could be initiated to reinstate it?
No. Anybody, a petitioner could bring it forward at the
No,
next.
but you said you can't.
Well, we
could
can't do
never
it again until it would be brought forward
Okay.
in a warrant article. Thank you, I appreciate that. So either a petitioner could bring it forward, or the school board and superintendent can add it to a future warrant. But until that takes place,
no.
we can't put any money toward it.
I'd just like to remind the public that we did away with the contingency fund when we went to this. So we used to have a separate warrant article for approximately $100,000 contingency line. That when we adopted this, the agreement was that we would move away from the contingency.
I would just like to clarify, we got rid of the contingency last year.
Right.
We were funding the contingency at $100,000 up to that point. But
Right.
now
Yep.
now we don't have the contingency line in the budget, and we would not have this money either.
Right.
And if it were to pass, would it take that 180 that we already have right now out? Or,
Yeah.
so we would just
We
have to
wouldn't be
move it
able to, we wouldn't be able to maintain that, because it's in there and authorized now, but it would prevent the school board from authorizing it again until another article were to come forward that would reinstitute it.
Does it happen in the current fiscal year or the next fiscal year? So for 2023 fiscal year, does the money come out of 2022? So we'd be able to put the money in for 2023, but not next year for the following year?
So we would need to return, if this were to pass, we would need to, without any action by the school board, return the $180,000 that's currently retained. So that would be returned as part of the unassigned fund balance.
you have to empty it at the end of June 30 this year.
Yes.
Right, we have access to it until June 30.
30th.
And you said without any action by the board, what action could the board take that would override that?
You could spend part of it up until June 30th.
Or potentially encumber it?
No, you couldn't encumber it. You would need to spend it through a public hearing. Well, or authorize an encumbrance, yes, sorry,
Okay.
yes.
And can anyone, either Kelly or Andy or Darlene, how would this affect budgeting and operations going forward? What action would you advocate should this pass?
Well, we wouldn't have a contingency of any kind in FY '23, so, one would want to have that. I would think maybe reinstate the $100,000 through a floor motion if this were to pass.
I don't know
Chris,
if
do
we
you have
could
a
do
question?
that.
No.
I don't know, because if the articles go in order, we would have already approved
The budget.
the budget.
Yeah.
From a
Good
fiscal
point.
planning perspective, I've shared this information in the past, and I can have it available for the annual meeting. The co-op itself with the 1%, we're the district with the largest budget, the biggest schools, and the lowest amount of money held in any form of contingency retained fund, trust funds, revolving account, whatever, those kinds of savings types accounts. Both Hollis and Brookline have 2.5% maximums. Again, I think until this past year, neither district maximized their use of the retained fund balance, but with COVID, each district, I believe, did. And so I can put a summary together of where the positions stand, but basically the co-op would be without these other types of kind of contingency funds. And I think given some of the, issues and things that have come up in a pandemic situation like this, or kind of those unknown factors, and the fact that from a federal grant perspective, we really get very little funding, I think it would be imprudent to not have some type of retained fund balance. Both towns can can keep their unassigned fund balances and they don't lapse, and the school districts are the only ones whose funds do lapse. So it's mechanisms like this or a contingency line in the budget that enable us to keep what is an extremely small percentage of the budget.
Would the Budget Committee likely support putting contingency money back in the budget were this to pass?
Personally, I would, but I can't speak for other Budget Committee members.
Anyone else care to comment?
Just, so in the absence of having something to fall back on, in the event of some kind of catastrophe in the school, I don't care what it is, you wouldn't have the money to address that particular need at that time. And you could run into a situation, now correct me if I'm saying could, where the school would have to close until money was appropriated to fix something. Is that the way I'm understanding it?
I would leave that to the superintendent, but I would say,
What would be most likely to happen is I would have to go into the budget. Let's say the elevator went here at the middle school.
Sure.
Okay? I can't operate without an elevator. So I'm going to take that. The first thing I would probably do, Tony, is if this succeeded at the meeting, I would not recommend expending any money from the maintenance trust. I wouldn't do phase 7 or that because I need something in case something goes wrong. And then if it was beyond that, we would go into the budget and try to find funds within the budget. If it's something major, we would probably end up in the red and have a appropriate funds at FY23 to make up that deficit before you fund the operating budget.
It becomes a very awkward situation.
Yeah.
Can the order of articles be changed still?
Yes, I'm getting a nod from the moderator.
You decide that.
The reason I'm saying that is I suggest that this article be moved before the vote on the budget, so that if it were to pass, it leaves the option to amend the budget.
So we can take a vote on our position on it, and then we can rearrange the warrant.
Can we also, I'm sorry, can we also reopen an article before the meeting's closed? I know we don't want to, I'm just saying, that's another way to evaluate this if you don't change the order.
Right.
Kelly, I just have to ask, is there specific language to the contingency article
That does what?
that references an RSA that allows us?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the text.
Okay.
The point is that I don't know if we can appropriate to a contingency line.
But we could, it's a bottom line budget, so we can just put it.
Yeah, but the contingency might have very specific language.
Tina's going to look.
Yeah,
I'm saying,
if you look
for a
at
year, you
last
do it
year's
without
deck.
the contingency.
I'm sorry?
For a year, you do it without a contingency. I mean, it's a Band-Aid, but.
Krista?
Okay, I just say that for all the reasons that we've just said, I wouldn't support the article. But in addition to the fact that we haven't been irresponsible with our contingency fund in the 10 years that I've been on the board, and the fact that 2 years ago we gave back $980,000, and this past year we gave back $1.9 million. So I think we keep the taxpayer in mind all the time, in addition to the fact that we're all taxpayers.
Let me just say that I would not support that article. Number one, it takes flexibility away from managing this whole operating budget, and I think the superintendent and his team does a great job in doing this year after year. And to with the $14.4 million that have been given back over the last 10 years. The second thing I would do.
That's across the SAU in all
Right,
districts.
that's correct, yeah, but we've done that a lot, so anyways. The second point I was going to make is, maybe we need to have a few examples in mind so when this topic comes up, we can illustrate. On a typical year, these are example projects for which we've had to encumber some funds from the unassigned fund balance to address major issues. So we should have examples like that to illustrate why it's not a good idea to approve this.
So at this point, I think I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of recommending this? All opposed? So the school board does not recommend this. It's
Okay.
0-6 is the vote.
Similarly, for the Budget Committee, your vote would be if you are in favor of the petition article as written. Raul?
No?
Matt?
No.
Tom?
No.
Dave?
No.
Tony?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Brian?
No.
Darlene votes no. So the Budget Committee does not recommend Article 8.
Okay, so now we're at to Article 9. I'm not sure what to call this article, but it's petition warrant Article 9. I need a motion to recommend Article 9.
So moved.
Moved by Beth, second.
Second.
Second by Kate. Does anyone want to speak to this? Yes,
Speak to
Tom?
it or speak about it?
Speak about it. Respond to it.
I think there's going to be perhaps some information coming forward in the near future from the libraries, but I'm guessing this is advisory only.
It is advisory only.
Because can't dictate to the libraries what they put in them. But the whole idea of doing this, I think, is an unnecessary expense, and it's a smokescreen for trying to institute censorship. And I'm very much opposed to the principle and the practicality of it.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other comments from the school board? This would be an inordinate amount of work to put on our SAU, on our staff, on our building principals. It would, we don't want raises in our budget, but we want more and more time from these people to do, and constant changing, more and more time. We want more and more time. That's what this petition warrant article basically wants. And it is, again, like you said, putting pressure on our libraries. So, yeah, I don't support this. Unless anybody else has a comment? All right. All those in favor of recommending this article? All those opposed? 0-6. That does not pass, or does not get recommended.
Darlene, if it's not inappropriate, I'd like to recommend that the Budget Committee also takes a position on this because of the significant financial impact that would be incurred if it were to pass. I think this is a very important and scary petition article.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the Budget Committee?
I just have a question. I know this is putting a burden on the public library, but the schools have their own libraries, which I assume all the material that would be at the public library would be available here. Am I overstating it? Is that incorrect?
No, I think that's accurate. I think you can find everything that's in the school library online right now.
So this would be redundant and just adding extra cost to the community.
I think it would definitely add cost. I could see myself requesting a position to do nothing but this across the SAU when you think of the 6 schools, because it asks for it by teacher, by grade level, and we would constantly be changing that based on staff retirements or different things that would occur for staffing. And I think, again, we have our material online on the websites, so I don't necessarily know the point of this.
So maybe the community doesn't understand, that this, what they're asking for, is already available to the public. Am I stating that correctly, or am I overstating that?
I was just going to say,
Yeah. All our curriculum's online, and the library resources, just the card catalog, every book we have in the library is there.
Well, I was just going to make a comment. That is, as written, it isn't clear what the budgetary impact is, even though it is assumed. So on that technicality alone, I don't support the article as written. The language is ambiguous because it clearly suggests that this is a burden of the libraries rather than the school. And so therefore, if I was really proposing this, you'd have to work on the language to make it clearer, and there should be a budgetary impact if it's going to be one. However, I think that the public perhaps doesn't realize that there is some transparency already, and if they want the information, it is available. So maybe that's the issue. You know, in this day and age, there should be transparency to make sure we can all get along and make sure we're all feel right. And so this tends to be controversial as written, even though the intent perhaps was there, but not as written. So I like transparency, but at the same time, I want it to be technically correct, and it's not written appropriately.
So would, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Just a second, Tony. Tom had his hand up.
I just want to say, it's a lot less innocent than, you're giving benefit that isn't earned. The point of this is that there are organized efforts nationwide to remove and block the use of a lot of reading material. And this is an effort to complicate the process and intimidate teachers from including content in their classes that might subject them to things like the lawsuits that are now possible due to recent New Hampshire legislation, claiming that texts that might talk about, or that people might allege talk about preferential treatment or benefits, now become elements of a lawsuit. So this is not a transparency. This is an organized national effort to censor material in our schools, plain and simple. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get on a soapbox, but I don't want people to imply extra innocence. All of the class syllabi have reading lists. If you look at the arguments that have been made towards having this, it's been based on attempts to block the use of specific reading materials, to block the teaching of elements of the Civil War, of the Civil Rights Movement, of the Holocaust, specific texts relating to those, as well as LGBTQ topics, certain religious content, any books that refer to certain religious activities. This is being used as a mechanism to facilitate the removal of that content from our schools.
I don't necessarily, not to sidebar the discussion, but I do not necessarily agree with the evidence you're providing. That's your, you're assuming that would be the end result if this were to pass. I'm not even getting there yet. I tend to give people in the benefit of the doubt. I don't know who wrote this article or who submitted it. I'm just trying to focus on what it says and what the end result would be. I'm not trying to take it 5 steps further yet. I don't see any evidence that would require this article to be here.
Have you read the evidence, though? It's out there. This is in public
Nationwide,
discussion.
that may be true, but not necessarily here. So
Okay.
Tony?
I honestly would never make an assertion that is so broad as what you made, because that, I would say, more of an opinion. We give this information. The information is here. I would say it's probably not that much more difficult to have everything electronically available at the library.
Which library?
We'll put in any library.
You mean a public library or school library?
Either or. If it's here electronically, it could be at the library electronically. And whatever is visible is visible. People will do what they want to. If they choose to file lawsuits or whatever, it's on them. We can't be the monitor of those kinds of activities. Transparency is everything. This is what we have. We have it in the school, and people want to see it at the public library. If it's not that difficult, then why not? Just say why not. I can't assume what people might do and what their intents are. I don't know. I don't know what they are.
Okay. Brian?
Darlene, I had
Sure, go ahead, Brian.
my feeling about this particular warrant article is that it's too far into the policy realm for the budget committee to take a position on it. I'd just as soon leave it to the school board.
Okay. So I'll ask for a motion for whether or not the Budget Committee would like to take a motion on petition article number 9. Motions by Dave, seconded by Tom. So this is going to be to decide if we take a position.
Yeah, I mean, it calls out, to implement a policy, so that's where it does get into the policy.
But it is advisory, so even if it were to pass, it doesn't, advisory
It's
means it doesn't
advisory.
require
We don't have to
you
do
to
it.
do anything to take it up.
We don't have to do it. It's advisory only.
Okay. Is there any other discussion among the Budget Committee?
I just would comment that, as a budget committee member, we don't experience what Tom was explaining earlier at all of our meetings. And I've been to a number of the school board meetings and watched others where these things have been brought up, and it is an attack on our schools. It absolutely is. And it can't be sheltered by a very vague and poorly worded petition warrant article that makes no sense really from an implementation standpoint. So I would suggest that, again, that I'm in favor of voting on it because of the financial impact. But I also want to make sure we understand that there's a lot behind this petition warrant article if we do the research and
Okay.
find out what's behind it first.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so for the Budget Committee, the vote right now is to whether the Budget Committee will take a position on this article. Raul?
No.
Matt?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Tony?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
Darlene votes yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 to 4. So it does not pass.
It doesn't pass.
So the Budget Committee will not take a position on this
I just want to say
petition.
that the co-op board is sort of just influencing you guys, because that's sort of something we'd have to do, is take a vote on whether or not to vote, so. So, we're just living in our world here. Okay, go ahead, I think we're at 10.
Okay.
And that one is up.
Did you take your vote?
We took our
You
vote,
your
we
Okay.
said no.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Article 10 is the warrant article requiring estimated tax caps to be posted with the warrant. So I'll take a motion from the Budget Committee to recommend the petition article as written.
I'll make a motion to, I did discuss it, right?
It would be to.
You guys are going to vote on this one.
We're going to vote
Yeah.
on this one. Okay, so that's from Raul,
Second.
seconded by Matt. Okay.
And I need a motion to recommend Article 10.
So moved.
Moved by Beth,
Second.
second by Cindy. Did you want to speak to this?
Sure. So this article has made its appearance on and off over the past 4 or 5 years. And predominantly, Jim O'Shaughnessy, our district council, has provided some clarification on this. But predominantly, what this does is require a tax impact to be printed in the language of every article. In the past, the Budget Committee has not supported this because it really is a context issue. Just, merely looking at a tax impact in the body of a warrant article without understanding the dynamics and what contributes to it, just really doesn't explain what the true impact is. So, as I mentioned earlier, in what might be a very confusing explanation as to how we calculate tax rates and what it needs to get added to, basically any tax rate you have for the co-op needs to be added to your Brookline School District or Hollis District estimated tax rate to come up with a local tax rate that you could then compare to your tax bill. So it's a very multi-step and layered process, and in my mind, adds a layer of confusion to an already complicated issue of understanding tax rate impacts, combined with the fact that not every district has the requirement to post their tax impacts with their warrant, and it would cause that person to have to take one additional step and pull up public hearing data and things like that. To be able to kind of combine those rates. So really, from a context perspective, it really feels like it would be more confusing than helpful. The clarification that Jim O'Shaughnessy provided in prior meetings, when somebody asked if there was more clarification that could be added other than just the tax rate itself, like could you say which is higher or lower than the previous year, or any type of clarifying language, the answer was no. So it really is, you're just stating like the tax impacts that I shared as part of the public hearing deck, and will be shared again at the annual meeting with the context of the reasons, why we're putting something forward, is really the language that would be included. There's no other clarification that can go with it.
Thanks, Darlene, for that
Sure.
summary. Are there any comments?
I have a comment.
Sure.
When you tie this in with SB2, then it basically tells the public, you don't need to get the details, here's the number. So if you're opposed to SB2, you should be opposed to this. If you want SB2 to pass, this is like required action so that SB2 then can work as intended. Does that make sense? And that's how I see it.
Tom?
So,
Is what it would require different than what than the kind of notations you've put on the slides?
No, it would just be added as a sentence, I assume. The Hollis tax rate impact would be written in the body of the warrant itself, not as a little chart, or we would just have to add it to the text.
So there'd be the rate, and then perhaps the dollar per thousand or dollars per 100,000 kind of thing?
Yeah, it would be dollars per thousand.
so when you go to the,
Yeah. Is it required, if SB2 passes, is there an automatic requirement to do so?
I'm seeing no.
No.
No? Okay.
Okay, if there are no other comments from the board, I'll take a vote. All those, you guys,
You can go.
Do you
Oh,
have-
I'm sorry,
Make
Tony.
a comment like that.
no, go ahead, Tony, I can
No,
wait.
go ahead.
Any one of the items would have such a minuscule impact, and you start looking at passing out little pieces, and I don't think it really gives much value to the overall numbers. And that means everything would change, people would be looking and picking, and I think it would just add more confusion than it would add information.
no, but when you go and vote, you're not going to have to reference all this other material that you may need to make a good decision, right?
Okay, so,
Actually, I had a comment.
Sure, Brian, go ahead. Sorry.
it's okay.
I voted both in favor of and opposed to these articles in the past. I kind of see both sides of it. But one thing that hasn't been discussed here that I find useful is having that information there with the warrant article does put some context to the numbers. When you're talking about $1 million, about $100,000, being able to see an effect on the tax rate does give you some sense of what the scale of this is compared to everything else. So I think it does provide some value from that perspective.
Thank you. Seeing that, I'm going to call the vote now. All those in favor? All those opposed? So that's 0-6 for the school board.
Okay, and for the Budget Committee, all those in favor of recommending this article? Raul?
No.
Matt?
No.
Tom?
No?
Dave? Tony?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
And Darlene votes no. So that's 1-7 to not recommend. Okay. I think that concludes the business of this meeting. Are there any other, oh, I see our moderator in
No,
motion.
I don't think so.
No?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Do we want to move Article 7 before the budget?
When do we do that? If we wanted to move Article 7 to be Article 2 or Article,
We can do it now.
The school board, if the school board does the order, you could move it now, and then Kelly would change it.
would you change the number of it or would it just, so would 7 become 2? Is that what would happen? Does anybody on the school board want to make a motion to do that? I don't know what number it would be. Somebody has to.
I'll make the motion, but I'd like to have some discussion on it, but just to get it.
Well, can we motion it, put it on the table, and then
Trying to
discuss
figure
it?
it out.
We don't have to do it. We can vote against it.
Okay, I move to renumber the articles, taking what is currently number 7 and making that number 3 and changing all the subsequent numbers accordingly.
Wait, number 7 is SB2?
Is that it?
No, I don't think it's 7. Sorry, I might have said that wrong. It's 8. It's 8, sorry.
Number 8 and making that number 3 and changing all the other numbers appropriately.
Second.
So that's moved by Tom, seconded by Cindy.
Okay.
Did you want to discuss this?
Yeah, because in general, I'm not in favor of having these articles early. And if there's very little concern that there will be support for it, this may not be an appropriate move. I don't know what the sentiment is, but my concern is that if this were to pass, that it could have a negative impact. I mean, strategically, perhaps having it after the budget is better because you say to people, here's the consequences. It may make it easier for them if it's early. So I'm not necessarily advocating. I'd like to have some input from other board members and anyone else that's willing to weigh in on it.
Yeah, I think that if the Budget Committee has an opinion, we can listen to that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Darlene.
I was going to say, my only concern is that if the intention of moving this is, the concern that it passes and then you would want to make an addition to the operating budget to cover a contingency, my only concern is if the wording of the RSA allows or prevents us from adding that to the operating budget, and I'm going to...
My thought would be I wouldn't recommend it in the form of a contingency. I'd recommend it in the form of the bottom line to the budget.
Okay.
I think that's easier. I think it's easier to convey to folks. So if we were to send back 187,000, I would recommend looking at the 187,000 added to the operating budget for a one-year stopgap to give you time to decide if you want to do the article again or bring back a contingency article.
Yeah, I mean, if you vote, if you do it, I would amend just to increase it by a number.
Right.
And say it's to cover the anticipated money that has now been removed from the total budget for the school. I wouldn't say anything more or less, make a commitment of in or out, but I certainly wouldn't explicitly state it being put in as a contingency. I would just say I'm putting a chunk of money in.
Okay, because I just want to clarify, the specific RSA language does say a school district annually by an article separate from the budget and all other articles. So if we were to stipulate it as a contingency, it does need to be a separate article.
So we wouldn't, so if someone from the legislative body wants to add money to the budget, they can add money to the budget. So I think it makes sense to move this before the budget in our voting, on our warrant, because I think we want to give our voters flexibility in case something happens that we don't anticipate, so.
I have a question. What's the intent of the removal of a contingency fund if it's not to reduce the budget?
Well, obviously, right, if it passes.
So if this
What was the
passes,
question?
what's the likelihood that the same
If this passes,
legislative
right.
body
Right.
would vote to add that same amount of money back into the budget?
It's probably a good
Unless they've got a
point.
moral opposition to the word trust or something.
I think we can be overthinking it as well. So.
Yeah, just the basic of it is, they want to reduce the budget, then that's how you would do it. If you want to take away our safety net, I think we can make a much stronger argument in favor of a safety net than just a raw increase in the budget after we've lost a contingency fund. That's why I would recommend not moving it in front and giving it more leverage and weight than it deserves as a petition warrant article.
Krista?
I struggle putting it ahead of the business of the board and the budget committee, just because I think I think the work of the budget committee and the school board needs to go in front of petition warrant articles.
Good point. Okay.
Just, my overall concern is keeping the schools running as smoothly as possible for everyone. And I could see in the absence of having this ability, it becomes difficult in the event of some kind of an emergency. I could envision there'd be situations where the school may even have to close until something is addressed. And without having this immediacy to funds to move it forward, to keep the operations going smoothly, it's like, putting out fires. And I just can't see where that is a good idea.
So the other thing is, if we move it, then it's moved because we've moved it, and it sends a message that the petition warrant article is kind of something we really want to get taken care of before our own business. But if we don't move it, it can still be moved. A person, the legislative body could choose to move it. So once we sign off on this warrant, it's the legislative body that can make changes to it. So in terms of moving, right? Am I right? I'm right? So we don't have to move it today. It could be moved by someone else. So, all in favor of moving petition warrant article 8 to to be number 3? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, so we talked ourselves out of that. Okay, great. So we're not doing that.
No.
You don't have to vote on that. That was us.
Deciding on the order.
Okay, so the order is the same as it was today. At this point, do we have any other further business?
I don't think we
So
have
I
any further
could take a
business.
motion.
Holly,
No,
can I
sorry.
just ask that the school board members don't leave right away, because I need signatures.
Okay. All.
Do you need signatures eventually from the budget committee?
I do, but I'll do DocuSign.
Okay,
For
perfect.
them, yeah.
Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Beth.
Second.
Seconded by Kate. All in favor? Okay.
And similarly,
6-0.
a motion to adjourn from the budget committee?
Beth,
From
Kelly needs you to
Raul.
sign.
Seconded by Dave. I have to do a roll call, I'm really sorry.
And then also this one.
Raul,
No, I mean, yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dave?
And then-
Tony?
Whoops.
Cindy?
Switch document.
Brian?
Yes.
And Darlene votes yes. We're adjourned. Thank you.
We're adjourned too.